Well, good morning, everyone. A very warm welcome to the launch of the APSE Local Government Commission 2030 final report. I'm Paul O'Brien. I'm the chair of the APSE Local Government Commission. Before we start today's event, I would like to welcome all of our guests who are here in person, still safely distanced, of course, and also our online broadcast guests. I hope all of you will enjoy the event and take the opportunity to ask questions. I think there's a lot of food for thought contained within the report. And we will also have questions coming in from the live stream as well, in the chat box in the live stream. The ones in the room can, of course, just stick their real hands up, which will make a nice change. Before I introduce the report, I'd like to take the opportunity to introduce our commissioners. I'm truly grateful for their support over the last 18 months. It's been a strange old time. When we started out that journey, we hadn't heard of COVID, but we quickly adapted both the scope and the method of delivering our commission to accommodate this. In no particular order, could I introduce and thank our commissioners for their expertise, their time, their knowledge and their wisdom. Lord Gary Porter, Elma Murray, John Collins, Neil Schneider and Heather Wakefield. Our commissioners will be introducing different sections of the report and outlining the recommendations contained within each area. You will no doubt have many questions to ask them throughout today. Could I also take this opportunity to introduce Professor Steve Griggs. Professor Griggs led the Commission Executive and was supported by Dr. Arianna Giovannini, Neil Barnett and Mark Sanford. Steve and Neil are here with us today, and we're joined by Arianna and Mark online. So welcome to you all, and thank you for the huge input all of you have made in getting the Commission report to this juncture. Again, the executive team will be in hand throughout today. It would also be remiss of me not to thank Mo Baines and Matt Ellis for the huge part they've played in supporting and coordinating the work of the Commissioners. So thanks to them. We couldn't really have done this without them at all, I'm sure. I'd now like to share with you the fruits of 18 months of witness sessions, evidence gathering and probing lines of inquiry within our Commission. Local by default, our final report is presented to you today. So let's reset the system by adopting the principle of local by default. Let's improve local governance in the UK. Let's tackle inequality. Let's reconnect communities with public services. And let's make the system work for all.
But somebody decided that they needed an elected mayor over the top, Andy Burnham, who I quite like on a personal level, and he is really good. But Richard was quite capable of running a good Manchester. He didn't need for somebody else to be layered in over the top of him. And to be fair, a couple of months ago, there might be somebody in Whitehall and Westminster regretting the layering in of somebody else over the top of that. So perhaps they are learning a little bit from their own previous mistakes. But as I said earlier, if we'd written where we were now, on slides, and I should have stuck to them, but I can't. The world is different. So last week, Rob Jenrick put out a letter, again, putting Devo back on the table. And I think it's a much more measured proposition, and one that actually does have reflection on what people want locally for the shires, which is not the same as an urban model. So at least there's some recognition of moving away from a central government knows best and dictating all of the terms and conditions. But that still won't give local politicians the ability to craft a deal for services in their place, because it won't give real devolution. Because if I'm the leader of my place, I should control all of the public sector delivery vehicles in there. So health should sit underneath local accountable politicians. There's a slide up there somewhere that says that.
So when you're working in that kind of environment, there's certainly lots you can agree on and lots you can find to disagree on as well, actually. But it was great. It was really, really good work. So much of the report that you have is full of really rich content. And when I was reading it through earlier this week, it was actually a real pleasure to rediscover some of the material and the issues that we had come across, that we had discussed and debated over the last 18 years. And that's why it's over 100 pages. Did we think we were doing something that was going to be over 100 pages? No, I'm pretty sure we didn't actually when we started out. And what that report covers is the impact on different groups of our residents, and also from different perspectives, whether it's from the economy, from the environment, or even how we organise ourselves to try and do the very best for the people that live in our nations within the UK. And what we have seen on the back of COVID is not new inequalities, but a deepening and a broadening of the inequalities that exist in the UK. Whether it's access to services, whether it's lower or cuts in income, whether it's poverty, whether it's digital exclusion, it's worse, it's deeper, it's more impactful, and it's also broader. There are more people impacted now as well. So that has been a clear sign or a lead-in, I think, from what we had, which was a decade of cuts which have impoverished local government. But there's also been some positives, really good positives. The importance of people, what they could do, what they believed in, what was important to them, their resilience in managing something that none of us had ever had to manage before, none of us had expected. We've continually had to reassess throughout the whole period about how best to do this. And also the importance of place and people's view about the place that they live in, how they want it to work for them. Another positive has been the relationship between communities and councils and individuals in those communities. And we heard a lot of that during the time that we were taking evidence. And I've seen a lot of that through other work that I do as well. But that relationship about, right, how can we do things better? How can we deal with this incredible situation that we're working with? And there is something really strong that we need to build from there.
Before I start, I'd just like to thank you all as APSE members and Paul for inviting me to be a member of the Commission, which I've thoroughly enjoyed. Local government never ceases to amaze me, fascinate me, engage me, and although I'm no longer at Unison, is still very dear to my heart. The role of local authorities in terms of the level and nature of outsourced services that we currently have. And I think it's fairly clear to me that once services are outsourced, they're often lost in a way to the local authority, which is not acceptable. And so that leads on to the general view that was put to us that direct provision should be the default option for local services where it's the best option and delivers quality. I'll say a bit more about that later. Local government across the UK has lost almost 1 million jobs since 2010. But if you look at government data, you will see that the NHS workforce and the civil service, the central government workforces, in terms of number of posts, have continued to increase. Even though there may be vacant posts, the actual number of posts has increased significantly. So we have a predominantly female, 3/4 women in local government having to do the same and more post-COVID under very difficult conditions. And it's not just the number of jobs that's different. If you're a cleaner in local government, you generally earn less than a cleaner who works in a police service or a cleaner in the NHS. If you're a social worker in local government, you earn less than a social worker in the NHS, and so on. There's a clear pattern, and conditions of work in local government, and all of you probably know this yourself, because of cuts, have been whittled away in the last 10, 12 years, with annual leave being cut, maternity rights being cut in some places.
What we heard through the Commission loud and clear on finance, which is this particular chapter of the report, is that the current system of local government funding just isn't sustainable. Overall funding for local authorities has fallen significantly over the last decade, falling in real terms between 2009 and 2018 by some 19%. And as a share of GDP, we're now at a level which is the lowest level we've slumped to since 1948. Furthermore, the impact of cuts has been uneven, with the poorest hit hardest. For example, the level of cuts has varied massively between authorities, ranging from 46% of net spend in one authority to just 1.6% of spend in another. Children's services spending has fallen by 14% in the most deprived local authorities in the 8 years to 2018-19, but increased by 9% in the least deprived. And the New Policy Institute found that 97% of the reduction in council spending on services for disadvantaged adults and children took place in the most deprived fifth of local areas. Our first recommendation is that to be effective, councils need stable finance built on a long-term and predictable financial settlement so they can plan for the future. Consequently, we believe as a Commission that the settlement should be negotiated, agreed and allocated to each authority every 5 years, be sufficient to ensure councils can fulfil their legal responsibilities and meet the needs of local communities, be available to use as councils see fit, subject only to legislation and the local democratic process, and should increase to fully fund any additional responsibilities allocated by central government to local government.
There were 5 key areas of focus, and they're contained with recommendations 16 to 19. The first of that was around the model of political leadership decision-making, and we believe that should be a matter for local choice. Put that together through a particular window. Being a local councillor ain't a particularly attractive option to many. But what we did here was real passion, commitment and belief in the need to improve local areas and the outcomes for local people. Institutional complexity and churn, notably in England, has confused accountability. And since the 1990s, our local democratic architecture is much more complex. Now, it's far less so in Wales, and I've recently spent time with colleagues from local government in Wales, and I was so heartened to hear of so many improvements that have been made, genuine collaboration, better relationships with their devolved government, making much better differences to their local areas. And we've seen similar in Scotland and Northern Ireland, where we've seen a greater clarity of structural change to councils. But in England, it does remain much of a patchwork quilt. We've seen council mergers, we've seen combined authorities. They're often overlapped by police and crime commissioners, fire authorities, local enterprise partnerships, NHS providers, integrated care partnerships, regional schools commissioners, and I could go on and on. Many of those, of course, with differing geographical boundaries.
I want to thank all those who gave their time to put in evidence, come along to online to witness sessions, and thank the APSE membership for supporting the work of the Commission and giving us the opportunity to work on it. And the other point I'd say is that I looked at this launch as in some ways being the end of a process, but it's significantly dawned on me it's the beginning of a process. And I think one of the things is now that there is a clear agenda here, but it's thinking about how you build that how the Commission work goes forward and how we start to think about how you build a coalition for change to deliver on these recommendations. And
I just wanted to echo briefly what Steve just said in terms of thanking the commissioners and all those who came and gave evidence. I think it's fair to say that this report is really the product of a labor of love. It was something that everybody involved believed in, and I think this is really reflected in the quality and the focus of the recommendations given. I'll be very brief, and I'll pick up on one of the points that Gary mentioned at the beginning. Devolution is back on the agenda. Central government is saying that we need to focus on the local level if we want to deliver levelling up. I think this report provides a set of recommendations that really can help the government in doing that. The government is saying it needs recommendations and insight from the local level. Here we have a very good starting point.
And more importantly, taking on some of the recommendations, because there's some really, really good recommendations for us as local councillors.
As you said, we've got a workforce that is older, and they're going to retire. Oh, they've actually started retiring because of the COVID. So we're going to have a massive gap. So what does my esteemed colleagues propose we do ASP?
The country has subcontracted its training out to abroad, basically. We haven't put anywhere near the level of effort and resource behind training our own citizens to do the jobs that we know are there and will continue to be there. And we've been able to do that because we've been taking in labour from elsewhere. That's stopped now.
Yeah.
But I haven't seen a change in the appetite for training our own people. I haven't seen the sense that local authorities should have control over the skills agenda in the local authority area so that we train people for the jobs that are necessary and needed in an area. There is no point in saying to further education colleges, we want 3 million hairdressers. As you can tell, I don't use them. But when we need bricklayers, it's insane. But if we were running skills at a local level, that's what we would do, wouldn't we? We'd say, well, we've got a 10-year plan in this area. We're going to build X number of houses, so we need all of these trades to fulfil that employment base. And the good thing with doing that is you spend that money loads of times over.
Firstly, can I just say a huge thank you to the Commissioners. What an excellent report.
Thanks, Tracy.
I'm Councillor Tracy Dixon. I'm the leader at South Tyneside Council. And I like the idea of the constitutional settlement. Just with regard to that, how do you see this working in practical terms? What will it cover and how will it work?
I just wanted to add a very quick point on this question because, of course, it's a very good and relevant one. As you said, Paul, there are different ways of doing it. You can use the big bang approach or you can do it incrementally. But the reason why it is so important that we managed to get a constitutional protection for local government is that we have seen, especially throughout the pandemic, the negative effect of this. And before that, even throughout the period of austerity. It is essential now that local government gets a seat at the table and it gets protection, but it also gets a direct voice so that it can have a direct input on any decision that will affect its own future.
The proposals in this report would provide a streamlined, more easily understood form of local government. And actually, at a time when there will be financial pressures, I would argue a more cost-effective way of doing the kind of things that government wants to see done right across the country. If levelling up is to mean anything, surely empowering local areas to level up themselves and to debate and discuss and agree what levelling up looks like in their area has to be a part of that agenda.
Thinking about, how do we make sure that councillors are the leaders in their communities? We've got some very clear recommendations in this report. I think we've seen that happen in different parts of Scotland, in different parts of the rest of the UK, for sure. We saw evidence of that. But there's nothing like elected members actually getting involved with some of the community representatives. And I know it can be difficult, but getting them involved in that and actually getting some things done, real tangible things that communities can look at and say, they helped me do that.
I think we need to remember that public opinion is much more favourable towards local government than central government and many other public institutions, and we need to build upon that. There isn't much in the central government agenda that we can hang on. There's clearly levelling up, as Gary said. If you look at issues like women's safety, violence against women and racism at the moment, we can make very strong arguments for those needing to be tackled and dealt with at a local level. So we need to find the hooks, few as they are, within government policy. Finally, I think we have to have a very organised strategy which involves bombarding some groups of people with the report and the key findings. We need to identify MPs who can be champions. We need to target appropriate select committees and so on, but we need a very well worked out plan for how this is taken forward.
That in itself is enough reason why the government should take it on. Every pound that we spend, we get as taxpayers far better value than we do if the central government spends it. Better Care Fund was a classic example of that. When I was a chair of the LGA and we argued for the extra money for getting people out of hospital quicker, I used to get the team to bring me a report every week on a spreadsheet, proper. And that's not my strong suit, as people who know me know. But they used to show me across the whole country how many people we'd managed to get out of hospital for the same amount of pounds that the National Health Service hadn't got the amount of people out. So people were clogging up beds in hospitals and we were getting them out far quicker than the health service was getting them out, with only a fifth of the resource that they were being given for that specific purpose.
Now are different than they were over the last 40 years, and the commissioners have outlined why. COVID, devolution.
I do feel that we're at a crossroads just now in this area. This is such an important piece of work that's going to have a really wide audience. Working in public sector, someone said earlier on, really is a labour of love. It's a love of place, a love of the communities that we serve. And I think as a passionate public servant, for me, this is an opportunity for all of us to define and not be defined. And this report, the recommendations, really starts to help us to do this, along with some other work that's been led across Britain. A lot resonated for me today with the speakers and in the report itself. Wanted to single out a couple of areas that I'm passionate about, I think are so well represented in the report, and I think are so very important and need further challenge, I think, and exploration.
I've been asked to give a perspective as an experienced chief executive and as a Welsh perspective to try and triangulate, because one of the challenges for an APSE report in a devolved or semi-devolved UK is the gaps between home nations are growing. So how can it be universal? The other big challenge is the breadth and depth of this report. It's like all of those tricky, complex issues that we've wrestled with for many years, pulled together, refreshed, rethought. It's a compendium of problems, isn't it?
Really welcome this report as an important contribution to a much needed debate about the roles, the functions, the powers, responsibilities and funding for local public services. And CIPFA have long argued that before you can solve the funding issues, you need to be clear about what's the role, function and responsibility. And this report is very, very clear in doing that. It's an authoritative report. It's well researched, it's well written, it's got lots of credible sources, and it has some gravitas. The local leaders in the NHS, in police, in schools, in business, in universities, in civic society, to be talking about the benefits of local public services and greater local influence over those things. And maybe we need to talk about local public services, not local government, in terms of getting the message across to the public.
I was very taken by Colin's point about its relationships, not constitution. And I remember going to Llandrindod Wells for a unison local government all-branch meeting once, and the minister came in to address the meeting and stood up on the podium and squinted and went, Shirley, how's Bob? How's his leg? Yeah. Shirley was a cleaner in one of the councils who was on our National Local Government Committee, and the Minister for Local Government knew Shirley and knew that Bob had broken his leg. Now, I'm not suggesting that's possible everywhere, but there was certainly a very different feel. And the question I've been asking myself is, what does that mean for England?
And I think that challenge needs to go out to all local authorities and to the other public services about how we communicate that well. I try and envisage the type of, if we've all heard about the elevator pitch, but if you've got 45 seconds with the government minister, with the Prime Minister, what is it we're saying and why? And if we're out in communities, what is that? And are we going to be good enough to communicate this efficiently, effectively to such a broad base? And I think that's really helpful challenge that's been given.
Yeah. Whatever all the other arguments are, we need to make sure that the Treasury might get that one at some point. Yeah. For whatever reason, they don't get that yet. Yeah. But actually showing that actually this is going to be better value for, I hate the distinction between taxpayers and citizens because they're the same people ultimately. But people talk about taxpayers. If it's about better value for taxpayers, and that's the language the Treasury will hear, we need to show that local government rather than administration will deliver better value for money.
We just can't continue with this, the 50 years that we've spoken about of centralisation, the impact, the big build-up of pressure, the public policy pressures that have built up at the same time as austerity has reduced the resources available to local government. And then COVID's come along and really exacerbated all of that as well. we just can't continue with the current system. We're letting people down if we don't try to do something about it. You know, and when people say you can't, I say you can. I think we should really go for it with this. You know, so thanks for today, everybody. You know, thanks for the last 18 months, the commissioners. Like I've said a few times today, I think this is only the start of something rather than the end of something. We've heard from hundreds and hundreds of submissions. Hundreds of organisations have put forward their views to us. We've deliberated on that. We've brought forward this report on it. We've heard further challenges to that today, which I think is really helpful, really good. It helps us focus our thinking about some of the key issues that we need to answer. I really think that's a great challenge as well that was made there by Elma about getting on just now and doing some of this. You know, what local government can do to push forward on that as well. But at the same time, we need to be building up that conversation with local government, with central government, with political parties, with civil servants, and making that case for local by default. So thanks everybody for today, and thanks everybody that was online as well. There's important work that will be done in the coming weeks. It only remains for me really to say, you know, that after the past year, I hope some of you get some time with your families and loved ones over the coming weeks and get a bit of a break over the summer and look after yourselves. And thanks everybody for your inputs. It's been great. Thank you. Thanks.